had an office in the Cahuenga building, a room and a half on the 6th floor at the back. Mine had my name on it, and that only on the reception room. I always left that unlocked in case I had a client, and the client cared to sit down and wait. It had a faded red settee and a boy-sized library table with venerable magazines on it to give the place a professional touch. The rest of my suite contained 3 chairs and a swivel, flat desk with a glass top, a carpet that was just something on the floor, filing cases full of California climate, and 2 net curtains that puckered in and out like the lips of a toothless old man sleeping. The same stuff as I had last year. Not beautiful, not gay, but better than a tent on the beach. Hello. I bought myself a drink. It didn't do any good. I had another for the same result. Why worry? Why be doubtful and confused? Why be gnawed by suspicion? Call Marlowe and watch the wagon come. I was talking to the scales of an alligator. The name of the alligator being Marlowe, a private detective in our thriving little community. Not the brainiest guy in the world, but cheap. I had no face, no meaning, no personality, hardly a name. I was a blank man.
Far away from the big city and the world of the hard-boiled private eye lived Philip Marlowe's creator, Raymond Chandler. Chandler spent his last years in this quiet Southern Californian beach town, La Jolla, 130 miles to the south of Los Angeles. He died here on March the 26th, 1959. This is how he might have looked. Raymond Chandler was a best-selling author of mystery thrillers, but he was much more than a polished entertainer. His books should be judged not as escape literature, but as works of art. His stories are tough and fast, and his characters move in a real world. Chandler himself was a romantic, with all the chivalrous, old-fashioned virtues of a vanished Edwardian age. He was born in Chicago in 1888, but at the age of 7, after his parents' divorce, his mother brought him to London. After a classical education at Dulwich College, he lived on next to nothing in Bloomsbury and wrote precious poems and literary criticism for the highbrow weeklies. In 1919, Chandler and his mother moved to Los Angeles, where, abandoning his literary career, he became an accountant for an oil company. Shortly after his mother's death in 1924, he married a New York socialite, Pearl Cecily Hulbert, Sissy. At 53, already twice married, Sissy was 17 years older than Chandler. Though basically a shy man and a lonely man, Chandler affected a tough exterior. Uneasy in personal contacts, he preferred to express himself in prolific and uninhibited correspondence. The words he speaks in this film are from his published letters.
I am supposed to be a hard-boiled writer, but that means nothing. It is merely a method of projection. Personally, I am sensitive and even diffident. At times, I am extremely caustic and pugnacious. At other times, very sentimental. I'm not a good mixer because I'm very easily bored. And I'm not a completely amiable character any more than I am a facile and prolific writer.
The early 30s weren't very amiable times. Prohibition and depression brought political corruption, mob warfare, and violent crime. In 1933, an era ended for Chandler. The Depression had finished his oil career, and unexpectedly, at 45, he again turned to writing. This time not highbrow essays, but, like Dashiell Hammett, hard-boiled gangster fiction.
It was a type of writing that made most fiction of the time taste like a cup of lukewarm consommé at a spinsterish tea room. Possibly it was the smell of fear which the stories managed to generate. Their characters lived in a world gone wrong. A world in which, long before the atom bomb, civilization had created the machinery for its own destruction and was learning to use it with all the moronic delight of a gangster trying out his first machine gun. The law was something to be manipulated for profit and power. The streets were dark with something more than night.
And the dark streets needed a hero, an incorruptible private eye. This is Mallory, Chandler's first hero, later to emerge in the novels as Philip Marlowe.
Doped.
Undoubtedly, these stories had a fantastic element. When you were in doubt what to do next, you had a man come through the door with a gun in his hand.
Hi-ho, boys. I ought to rate a promotion for this.
Two down.
Chandler's first crime story took 5 months to write. Sold for $180, it was published in the December 1933 edition of Black Mask. The story was called Blackmailers Don't Shoot.
Beyond the unnecessarily gaudy covers, trashy titles, and barely acceptable advertisements, it struck me that some of the writing was pretty forceful and honest, even though it had its crude aspects. The emotional basis of the hard-boiled story is that it does not believe that murder will out and justice will be done, unless some very determined individual makes it his business to see that justice is done.
You don't get rich, you don't have much fun. Sometimes you get beaten up, or shot at, or tossed in the jailhouse. Once in a long while, you get dead. Every other month, you decide to give it up and find some sensible occupation while you can still walk without shaking your head.
So, you think I shot Chris Lavery?
I don't think it. I know it.
What are you going to do about it?
You're a cold-blooded little bitch if ever I saw one. Do about it? Turn you over to the police, naturally. It'll be a pleasure.
Oh, I don't think so.
You know, I've never liked this scene. Detective confronts murderer. Murderer produces gun and points same at detective. Murderer tells detective the whole sad story with the idea of shooting him at the end of it. Only something always happens to prevent it. The guards don't like this scene. They always manage to spoil it.
But this time, suppose we make it a little bit different. Suppose I don't tell you anything, and I do shoot you.
I still wouldn't like the scene.
You don't seem to be at all afraid.
I'm not afraid. You're not good with guns. You'd probably miss me.
Stand up. I'm going to be too close to miss, like this. I really can't miss now, can I?
There's something a little off-key about everything you do. You're definitely not good with guns, and I hate to bring it up, but there's that old business about the safety catch not being off. You've overlooked that, too.
Marlowe is a failure, and he knows it. He's a failure because he hasn't any money. A man who, without physical handicaps, cannot make a decent living is always a failure. A lot of very good men have been failures because their particular talents did not suit their time and place. In the long run, I guess we are all failures, or we wouldn't have the kind of world we have.
And Marlowe, the shop-soiled Sir Galahad, would never be understood by the cops.
You're an awful lucky boy, Marlowe. Twice you've slid out from under a heavy one. You could get overconfident. You're pretty helpful to people. You don't make a dime. What do you do for eating money, pal? Got enough saved up you don't have to work anymore?
I'm romantic, Bernie. I hear voices crying in the night and go see what's the matter. You don't make a dime that way. You got sense. You shut your windows, turn up more sound on the TV set, Stay out of other people's troubles. All it can get you is the smear. You don't make a dime that way. You wouldn't do it. That's why you're a good cop, and I'm a private eye. No percentage in it. No nothing. Except maybe sometimes I get my face pushed in or get tossed in a can or threatened by some fast money boy, but no money. Not a dime.
So, what's your point with all this yap?
No point. I told you I was romantic.
Yeah, I heard you. And you don't make a dime at it. I heard that, too.
But I can always tell a cop to go to hell. Go to hell, Bernie. I felt jaded and old. I felt as if I'd spent my life in cheap apartment houses. I thought, and thought in my mind moved with a kind of sluggish stealthiness, as if it was being watched by bitter and sadistic eyes. I thought of dead eyes looking at a moonless sky, with black blood at the corners of the mouths beneath them. I thought of death and despair, of dark water, and drowned men's faces and skulls with empty eye sockets. I was afraid of dying, of being nothing. I thought of a lot of things. Who am I cutting my throat for this time? Why? I don't know. All I know is that something isn't what it seems. And the old, tired, but always reliable hunch tells me that if the hand is played the way it is dealt, the wrong person is going to lose the pot. Is that my business? Well, what is my business? Did I ever know? Maybe I'm an ectoplasm with a private license. Maybe we all get like this in the cold, half-lit world where always the wrong things happen and never the right. After a while, I felt a little better, but very little. I needed a drink. I needed a lot of life insurance. I needed a vacation. I needed a home in the country. What I had was a coat, a hat, and a gun. I used to like this town a long time ago, when it wasn't a neon-lighted slum. Now it smells stale and old like a room that's been closed too long. We've got the big money, the sharpshooters, the fast dollar boys, the hoodlums. We've got the flash restaurants and nightclubs they run, and the hotels and apartment houses they own, and the grifters and con men and bandits that live in them. The riffraff of a big, hard-boiled city with no more personality than a paper cup. I drove past the gaudy neons and the false fronts behind them, the sleazy hamburger joints, the circular drive-ins as gay as circuses with the chip of hard-eyed car hops, the brilliant counters, and the sweaty, greasy kitchens. Tired men in dusty coupes and sedans winced and tightened their grip on the wheel and plowed on north and west towards home and dinner. An evening with a sports page, the blatting of the TV, the whining of their spoiled children, the gabble of their silly wives. Out in the fancy suburbs, dear old Dad is thinking he is high class because he has a 3-car garage. Mom is in front of her princess dresser trying to paint the suitcases out from under her eyes. And Junior is clamped onto the telephone, calling up a succession of high school girls that talk pidgin English and carry contraceptives in their makeup kit. The homes of screen stars. Screen stars? Phooey. The veterans of 1,000 beds. More pink and blue bathtubs, more tufted beds, more Chanel No. 5, more Lincoln Continentals and Cadillacs, more wind-blown hair and sunglasses and pseudo-refined voices and waterfront morals. I drove through the night air that nobody had yet found out how to option, but a lot of people were probably trying. They'd get around to it. No moon, no fuss, hardly a sound of the surf, no smell. None of the harsh, wild smell of the sea. This had once been a clean, open beach where the waves came in and creamed and the wind blew, and you could smell something besides hot fat and cold sweat. A California ocean. California, the department store state. The most of everything and the best of nothing.
I know Southern California pretty well. And to me, Chandler at his best conveys Southern California. Better than any writer I know, better than a lot of serious novelists who've written about Southern California.
JB Priestley.
One of the people who made him rather angry by saying he should write a novel. And I think it made him cross because it felt when we said that we were being superior to a so-called mystery story. But that's not the point at all. The point is that you have, to some extent in a detective story, to have a good plot. Now, he didn't have good plots. They weren't good plots, and he never worked them out properly. On the other hand, with a novel, you don't need as much plot. You can go on with scenes and atmosphere, and this is what he could do. And I think if he'd forgotten this, if he really had got down to writing a biggish, serious novel about Southern California, I think it might have been magnificent.
Why didn't he?
I think he was afraid to. I think that the detective element, the crime element, the dealing with violence and murder, gave him a kind of confidence. So in one sense, he was above the mystery story, and he had to be with it.
By 1943, The Big Sleep, Farewell, My Lovely, and Lady in the Lake had established Chandler's reputation. This was his most prolific period as a writer.
How do I work? No regular hours, can't keep them. I'm always seeing little pieces by writers about how they don't ever wait for inspiration. They just sit down at their little desks every morning at 8, rain or shine, hangover and broken arm, and bang out their little stint. No nonsense about inspiration from them. Me, I wait for inspiration. I write when I can, and I don't write when I can't. But I'm still an amateur, perfectly capable of dropping writing altogether, taking up the study of law or comparative philology. My secretary is a black Persian cat. Her name is Taki, and she's been around ever since I began to write, usually gazing out of the window as if to say, "The stuff you're doing is a waste of time, bud."
Mr. Chandler, why should the murder mystery be taken seriously?
Murder, which is a frustration of the individual and hence a frustration of the race, has a good deal of sociological implication. It is just possible that the tensions in a novel of murder are the simplest and yet most complete pattern of the tensions on which we live in this generation.
But aren't mystery stories quite unrealistic?
The mystery novel must be realistic as to character, setting, and atmosphere. It must be about real people in a real world. It is the type of story where the search is not for a specific criminal, but for a meaning in character and relationship. What the hell went on rather than who done it. The emphasis is always on people, not on facts.
Are you suggesting that the thriller is a vital and significant form of art?
There are no vital and significant forms of art. There's only art, and precious little of that. Where a book, any sort of book, reaches a certain intensity of artistic performance, it becomes literature. Neither in America nor in England has there been any critical recognition that far more art goes into these books at their best than into any number of fat volumes of goosed history and social significance rubbish.
Do you think that literary critics take your work seriously enough?
I think most critical writing is drivel, and half of it is dishonest. Once in a long while, a detective story writer is treated as a writer, but very seldom. However well and expertly he writes his mystery story, it will be reviewed in one paragraph.
Why are you so concerned with style in writing?
What I care about is the creation of emotion through dialogue and description. I wanted to play with a fascinating new language, to see what it would do as a means of expression which might remain on the level of unintellectual thinking and still acquire the power to say things which are usually only said with a literary air. Ah, the hell with it. Ideas are poison. The more you reason, the less you create. All writing that has any life in it is done with the solar plexus.
Chandler's writing from the solar plexus inevitably attracted the attention of Hollywood.
Tell me what's engraved on that anklet.
Just my name.
As, for instance?
Phyllis.
Phyllis, huh? I think I like that.
But you're not sure.
Well, I'd have to drive it around the block a couple of times.
Mr. Neff, why don't you drop by tomorrow evening around 8:30? He'll be in then.
Who?
My husband. You were anxious to talk to him, weren't you?
Yeah, I was, but I'm sort of getting over the idea, if you know what I mean.
There's a speed limit in this state, Mr. Neff. 45 miles an hour.
How fast was I going, officer?
I'd say around 90.
Suppose you get down off your motorcycle and give me a ticket.
Suppose I let you off with a warning this time.
Suppose it doesn't take.
Suppose I have to whack you over the knuckles.
Suppose I bust out crying and put my head on your shoulder.
Suppose you try putting it on my husband's shoulder.
That tears it.
Hollywood is easy to hate, easy to sneer at, easy to lampoon. I hold no brief for Hollywood. I worked there not long enough to make me an authority, but more than enough to make me feel pretty thoroughly bored. The overall picture is of a degraded community, whose idealism even is largely fake. The pretentiousness, the bogus enthusiasm, the incessant squabbling over money, the constant fear of losing all this fairy gold and being the nothing they have never ceased to be, the whole damn mess is out of this world.
Thank you so very much for coming back here. I imagine the traffic was a little rough this evening.
The Hollywood manner is a chronic case of spurious excitement over absolutely nothing. It expresses the motion picture industry's frantic desire to kiss itself on the back of the neck.
You look really costume. How do we get to see you in such beautiful clothes that you wear? So
Why should any writer of genuine ability continue to work in Hollywood at all? Money buys pathetically little in Hollywood, beyond the pleasure of living in an unreal world, associating with a narrow group of people who think, talk, and drink nothing but pictures, most of them bad.
I said, fine. I said, she looks great. She's lost a lot of weight. And he said, well, I'm glad to hear that.
But he stopped me as I was coming out of the delicatessen. He says, how are things in Biarritz? And walked on.
Yes, and it got excellent notices in London. Better in London than it was here.
He said they couldn't stand him. He didn't have a friend in the whole place.
But I must say that I personally had a lot of fun there.
And Hollywood certainly made good films from his novels, especially The Big Sleep with Bogart and Bacall.
You wanted to see me?
So you're a private detective. I didn't know they existed except in books, or else they were greasy little men snooping around hotel corridors.
I'm not very tall either. Next time I'll come on stilts, wear a white tie, and carry a tennis racket.
I doubt if even that would help. Now, this business of Dad's, think you can handle it for him?
It shouldn't be too tough.
Really? I would have thought a case like that took a little effort.
Not too much.
What will your first step be?
The usual one.
I didn't know there was a usual
Oh,
one.
sure there is. It comes complete with diagrams on page 47 of How to Be a Detective in 10 Easy Lessons, correspondence school textbook, and your father offered me a drink.
You must have read another one on how to be a comedian.
Hear what I said about the drink?
I'm quite serious, Mr. Marlowe. My
I
father's
said your
trying to help
father-
yourself.
In 1946, at 58, disenchanted with Hollywood, Chandler and Sissy moved away from the ugly Los Angeles he'd once called good-hearted and peaceful to the gentle town of La Jolla.
I like the people who work, who are unfailingly polite, who smile at you on the street, even when you can't quite remember who they are. I like the people in the shops, in the supermarkets, and every kind of store. No one has ever been rude to me in La Jolla. It just isn't in the air. My wife desires no publicity, is pretty drastic about it. She doesn't paint or write. She does play the piano when she gets time. Most of the time we are between cooks, and she does not have time.
Cissy always seemed slightly out of touch with Chandler's work, though the difference of 17 years in their ages never concerned him. But her failing health was a continual worry. She had developed fibrosis of the lungs, a slow hardening of the lung tissue. Chandler was now writing in a much more serious vein. His fifth book, The Little Sister, written in 1948, satirized his Hollywood experiences. While retaining the form of the mystery story, Chandler concentrated more on scene and atmosphere and characterization than on an incoherent plot. The Long Goodbye, his next book, published in 1953, is much more a straight novel than a mystery thriller. Written during Cissy's long illness, its angry, bitter theme is the decay of refinement in modern American society. Chandler also modified his earlier flat, hard, objective style, using his characters as mouthpieces to represent his new disillusionment with the American way of life.
There were great silent estates with high walls and wrought iron gates and ornamental hedges. And inside, a special brand of sunshine, very quiet, put up in noise-proof containers just for the upper classes. Nobody walked in that neighborhood, not even the postman. Idle Valley was having a perfect summer. Someone had planned it that way. Paradise Incorporated, and also highly restricted. Only the nicest people. Absolutely no Central Europeans. Just the cream, the top drawer crowd, the lovely, lovely people. Pure gold. But all a man named Marlowe wanted from it was out, and fast.
In our time, we have seen a shocking decline in both public and private morals. You can't expect quality from people whose lives are a subjection to a lack of quality. You don't want it because it lasts too long. We have the whitest kitchens and the most shining bathrooms in the world, but in the lovely white kitchen, the average American housewife can't produce a meal fit to eat. And the lovely shining bathroom is mostly a receptacle for deodorants, laxatives, sleeping pills, and the product of that confidence racket called the cosmetic industry. We make the finest packages in the world, Mr. Marlowe. The stuff inside is mostly junk. This country, through its enormous talent for manufacture, has worked itself into an economy of overproduction. Half the world is starving, yet we have to have a new refrigerator and a new car every year. If we don't, we feel inferior, because we are made to feel inferior. What I and people of my kind expect is to be allowed to live our lives in decent privacy.
I got your point, all right, Mr. Potter. You don't like the way the world is going. You got $100 million, and all it's bought you is a pain in the neck.
What do you want from me, Marlowe?
You mean how much money? Nothing. I didn't ask myself here. I was brought.
A telephone call, Mr. Marlowe, would deprive you of your license.
2 telephone calls, and I'd wake up kissing the gutter with the back of my head missing.
I don't operate that way. Though I suppose in your quaint line of business, it is natural for you to think so. You seem a pretty honest sort of fellow. Don't be a hero, young man. There's no percentage in it.
But Marlowe's quaint line of business at least could provide a percentage for Hollywood. Philip Marlowe is a magnet for trouble, and violence is very much a part of his life, and of his screen life. This is a scene from MGM's The Lady in the Lake. And this from MGM's forthcoming release, Marlowe.
Nobody yelled or ran out of the door. Nobody blew a police whistle. Everything was quiet and sunny and calm. No cause for excitement whatever. It's only Marlowe finding another body. He does it rather well by now. Murderer Day Marlowe, they call him. They have the meat wagon following him around to follow up on the business he finds.
Trouble followed Marlowe around, and the cops wouldn't be far behind. Marlowe didn't really get on too well with Los Angeles cops.
You're limping a little. You trip over something?
Yeah, I tripped over a blackjack. It jumped up and bit me behind the left knee.
He knows Lennox pretty well, but he won't say when he saw him last.
The DA smells a lot of headlines on this one. I guess we better pick this fella's nose for it.
All we got on him is he won't tell us nothing, Skipper.
You think you're tough, huh? We could change that. Who took the cuffs off? Put them back on. Behind his back. Give him something to brace him up. Tighter. Make him bite. You can talk now. And make it snappy. So we don't like coffee. Ain't here, mister. A dick license don't mean any more than a calling card. This office is investigating a murder. Now, if you think any goddamn private eye is gonna quote law at me over this, mister, you're in for a hell of a tough time. There ain't a police force in the country could do its job with a law book. Now, you got information. I want it. You're not dumming up with me, mister. Not 6 cents worth. Let's go.
Would you take the cuffs off, Captain? I mean, if I made a statement.
I might. Make it short.
I'd like to cooperate. How would it be if we had somebody from the DA's office here?
Well, that was silly.
Okay, it's silly, otherwise I wouldn't be here. In my business, people come to me with troubles. Troubles they don't want to take to the law. How long would they come if any bruiser with a police shield could hang me upside down and drain my guts?
You take a good punch, mister. That's all you'll get from me. Now, you got any more funny little ideas about what you might say if you bother to say it?
You're not only a gorilla, you're an incompetent. I wouldn't tell you the time by the clock on your own wall.
You're just a little old cop-hater, friend. That's all you are, Seamus. Just a little old cop-hater.
There are places where cops aren't hated, Captain. But in those places, you wouldn't be a cop.
Gregorius.
They had the look of men who were poor
Yeah, he's
and yet
here in
proud
my
of their power.
asking
Watching always for ways to make it felt, to shove it into you and twist it and grin and watch you squirm. Ruthless without malice, cruel and yet not always unkind. What would you expect them to be? Civilization had no meaning for them. All they saw of it was the failures, the dirt, the dregs, the aberrations, and the disgust.
Book him in the county jail. Suspicion of murder.
Okay, go over there and wash your hands in the room.
In jail, a man has no personality. He's a minor disposal problem and a few entries on reports.
Okay, right out here. Follow me. Right this way.
Nobody cares who loves or hates him, what he looks like, what he did with his life. There's nothing to fight against, nothing to be mad at.
Okay, stand over here.
The jailers are quiet men without animosity or sadism.
Stand up a little closer. That's fine.
A good jail is one of the quietest places in the world. You could walk through the average cell block at night and look in through the bars and see a huddle of brown blanket or a head of hair or a pair of eyes looking at nothing. You might hear a snore. Once in a long while, you might hear a nightmare. The life in a jail is in suspension, without purpose or meaning. All that is asked of you is that you go quietly to the right cell and remain quiet when you get there. Since he was asleep that early and didn't smell of whiskey or gin and had chosen the top berth where he'd be out of the way, I judged he was an old lodger. He slept well. He was one of the best. The jail seemed very quiet. Business was rotten. It was a very nice jail. It was on the 3rd floor of a new city building. It was a very nice city building. Bay City was a very nice place. People lived there and thought so. If I lived there, I would probably think so. I knew a girl who lived on 25th Street. It was a nice street. She was a nice girl. She liked Bay City. She wouldn't think about the Mexican and Negro slums stretched out on the dismal flats south of the old interurban tracks, nor of the waterfront dives along the flat shore south of the cliffs, nor the pickpockets and grifters and con men and drunk rollers and pimps and queens on the boardwalk. 9:54. Time to go home and get your slippers on and play over a game of chess. Time for a tall, cool drink and a long, quiet pipe. Time to sit with your feet up and think of nothing. Time to start yawning over your magazine. Time to be a human being, a householder, a man with nothing to do but rest and suck in the night air and rebuild the brain for tomorrow.
All right, you, stand straight. Pull your belly in. Pull your chin in. Keep your shoulders back. Hold your head level. Now turn left. Turn right. Face front again. No visible scars. Hair dark brown, some gray, eyes blue. Height 6 feet 1/2 inch. Name Philip Marlowe. Occupation private detective. Well, well, nice to see you, Marlowe.
I got home late and tired and depressed. It was one of those nights when the air is heavy and the night noises seem muffled and far away. The passing minutes seemed to fall into a void with a soft whirring sound like spent rockets. I was brooding and irritable and mean and oversensitive. I felt like a half-digested meal eaten in a greasy spoon joint. I was as hollow and empty as the spaces between the stars. I mixed a stiff one and stood by the window and sipped it and listened to the groundswell of the traffic and looked at the glare of the big, angry city. Far off, the banshee wail of police or fire sirens rose and fell. 24 hours a day, somebody is running. Somebody else is trying to catch him. Out there in the night of 1,000 crimes, people were dying, being maimed, cut by flying glass, crushed against steering wheels or under heavy car tires. People were being beaten, robbed, strangled, raped, and murdered. People were hungry, sick, bored, desperate with loneliness or remorse or fear, angry, cruel, feverish, shaken by sobs. A city no worse than others, a city rich and vigorous and full of pride, a city lost and beaten and full of emptiness. Part of me wanted to get out and stay out. But this was the part I never listened to. Because if I ever had, I would have stayed in the town where I was born and worked in the hardware store and married the boss's daughter and had 5 kids and read them the funny paper on Sunday morning and squabbled with a wife about how much spending money they were to get. I might even have got rich, small town rich. An 8-room house, 2 cars in the garage, chicken every Sunday, and the Reader's Digest on the living room table, the wife with a cast iron permanent, and me with a brain like a sack of Portland cement. You take it, friend. I'll take the big, sordid, dirty, crooked city.
While Chandler had been writing The Long Goodbye, Sissy's health had deteriorated rapidly. He knew that it was only a matter of time.
I am worn down by worry over my wife. I wake in the night with dreadful thoughts. Sissy can do very, very little. She's lost a lot of ground in the last 2 years. She has a constant cough, which can only be kept down by drugs. And the drugs destroy her vitality. When I get into work, I'm already tired and dispirited. I've lost weight lately and live easily.
Philip Marlowe's private life had previously always been kept off stage. Chandler once said of him,
He is neither a eunuch nor a satyr. I think he might seduce a duchess, and I am quite sure he would not spoil a virgin.
Blondes usually appealed to Marlowe, blondes with cornflower blue eyes that resembled Sissy. But in The Long Goodbye, Marlowe meets Linda Loring, a different kind of girl. The kind of girl he could have married, if she hadn't been a millionaire's daughter.
Would you consider marrying me?
It wouldn't last 6 months.
Oh, for God's sake, suppose it didn't. Wouldn't it be worth it?
I'm 42 years old and spoiled by independence. You're spoiled a little. Not too much by money.
I'm 36. And it's no disgrace to have money and no disgrace to marry it. Do you have something against marriage?
For 2 people in 100, it's wonderful. The rest just work at it.
I want some champagne.
Besides, it would just be an incident to you. The first divorce is the only tough one. After that, it's merely a problem in economics. No problem to you. 10 years' time, you might pass me in the street and wonder where the hell you'd seen me before.
Oh, you self-sufficient, self-satisfied, self-confident, untouchable bastard. I want some champagne.
This way, you'll remember me.
Conceited, too. You think I'll remember you? No matter how many men I marry or sleep with, you think I'll remember you. Why should I?
I'm sorry. I overstated my case. I'll get you some champagne.
Aren't we sweet and reasonable? I'm a rich woman, darling. I could buy you the world if it were worth buying. What have you now? An empty apartment to come home to? A stuffy office to sit and wait in? Even if I divorced you, I wouldn't let you go back to that.
How would you stop me?
You utter fool. Say it lasts 6 months, a year, or 2 years. What would you have lost except the dust in your office desk, dirt on your Venetian blinds, and the loneliness of a pretty empty life?
You still want some champagne?
All right.
She wasn't in love with me, and we both knew it. She wasn't crying over me. It was just time for her to shed a few tears. But there was a lump of lead at the pit of my stomach.
On the 12th of December, 1954, Sissy died. She was 83.
I'm pretty badly broken up. And for me, it may last a long time, as my emotions are not superficial. Of course, in a sense, I had said goodbye to her long ago. I had realized it was only a question of time until I lost her. But that is not the same thing as having it happen. I'm sleeping in her room. I thought I couldn't face that. And then I thought that if the room were empty, it would just be haunted. And every time I walked past the door, I would have the horrors. And that the only thing was for me to come in here, fill it up with my junk, and make it look like the kind of mess I'm used to living in. She was the beat of my heart for 30 years. She was the music, heard faintly at the edge of sound. It was my great and now useless regret that I never wrote anything really worth her attention. No book I could dedicate to her. I planned it, I thought of it, but I never wrote it. Perhaps I couldn't have written it. For 30 years, 10 months, and 4 days, she was the light of my life, my whole ambition. Anything else I did was just the fire to warm her hands at.
te jette au malheur, tu n'auras pas mes yeux pour mourir.
I sit up half the night playing records when I have the blues and can't get drunk enough to feel sleepy. My nights are pretty awful. Tomorrow is, or would have been, our 31st wedding anniversary. I'm going to fill the house with red roses and have a friend in to drink champagne, which we always did. A useless and probably foolish gesture, because my lost love is utterly lost, and I have no belief in any afterlife. But just the same, I shall do it. All us tough guys are hopeless sentimentalists at heart. If I'd had more guts, I shouldn't have let despair and grief get me down so far that I did what I did. I couldn't for the life of me tell whether I really meant to go through with it, whether my subconscious was putting on a cheap dramatic performance. The successful suicide is tragedy. The suicide failure is farce. The first shot went off without my intending it to. I had never fired the gun, and the trigger pull was so light that I barely touched it to get my hand in position when off she went. At that point, I blacked out.
As usual,
Juanita Messick, Chandler's secretary at this time.
I went to the office in his home, which was my custom at the time. When I went into the house, he was talking on the telephone in a very loud voice. I realized this was for my benefit as I went down the hall. I heard him say, "Yes, Captain, tonight at 10:30. As I went into the room, I thought I heard a shot. And I went to the dressing room door, and as I started to open the door, I knew I heard a second shot. With that, I called the police, who were coming down the hall by that time, and one of the very young officers gingerly opened the door and said, do you want to give me that, sir? Do you want to come out of there, sir?" And Mr. Chandler laughed and handed him the gun and came out into the bedroom.
I don't regret it. I don't think I was wicked. I believe every man has the right to end his life when it gets too much for him. But I wouldn't try again. It's hard to lose the woman you love. It's harder still to face the fact that you can live without her, even forget her at times. I've reached that stage. Our life together seems like something enclosed in a crystal casket. Precious, but somehow remote and unreal.
Chandler sold his house in La Jolla and spent long periods in London, where he enjoyed the critical admiration of the intellectuals.
Here in England, I am not regarded as a mystery writer, but as an American novelist of some importance. There is none of that snobism which makes a fourth-rate, serious novelist, without style or any real talent, superior by definition to a mystery writer who might have helped recreate a whole literature.
Chandler began working again, though desperately lonely and drinking heavily. In 1958, he published Playback, but it lacked the characteristic power of his earlier work. He started a new novel, The Poodle Spring Story, but completed only 4 brief chapters. Surprisingly, Philip Marlowe has married Linda Loring, in spite of her $8 million. This is one of the last scenes Chandler wrote.
It's too rich for me. Let's get divorced.
You dog. It's nothing to what we'll have when we build a house.
I'm going to have to dust my office after this. I'd feel inferior if I didn't.
You don't need an office, stupid. What do you suppose I married you for?
Must be some business in Poodle Springs. There's a lot of money here. And I might grab off an occasional nickel.
Oh, I hate you. I don't know why I married you, but you were so insistent. I settled $1 million on you, to do with as you like.
A nice, kind gesture. But you know I wouldn't touch it.
I'll never change you, will I?
Do you really want to make a purring pussycat out of me?
No. I didn't marry you because I had a lot of money and you had hardly any. I married you because I love you. And one of the things I love you for is that you don't give a damn for anybody. Sometimes not even for me. I don't want you to be cheap, darling. I want to try to make you happy.
I'm a poor man married to a rich wife. I don't know how to behave. I'm only sure of one thing. Shabby office or not, that's where I became what I am. And that's where I will be what I will be.
Down these mean streets a man must go, who is not himself mean, who is neither tarnished nor frayed. The detective in this kind of story must be such a man. He must be a complete man and a common man, and yet an unusual man. He must be the best man in his world and a good enough man for any world. He is a lonely man, a poor man, a dangerous man, and yet a sympathetic man. That is his destiny. Possibly not the best destiny in the world, but it belongs to him. No one will ever make him rich because he is destined to be poor. But somehow he would not have it otherwise. I see him always in a lonely street, puzzled, but never quite defeated.
In February 1959, Chandler was elected president of the Mystery Writers of America. On March 26th, at the age of 70, he died in La Jolla of bronchial pneumonia. He was buried here in Mount Hope Cemetery, San Diego.
Most of my life has been spent in trying to make something of the mystery story. Perhaps a little more than it was intended to be. I cared about the people, about this strange, corrupt world we live in, and how any man who tried to be honest looks in the end either sentimental or plain foolish. Many writers, although not all, concede that I did manage to recreate a worn-out medium. To accept a mediocre form and make something like literature out of it is in itself rather an accomplishment. But hell, what else can you do when you write? You do the best you can in any medium. Any man who can write a page of living prose adds something to our life. We are not always nice people, but essentially, we have an ideal that transcends ourselves.